Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we take all the sources, the fan theories, and, the hours of screen time you've put into a topic, and we try to boil it all down into something crisp and insightful just for you.
Yeah, and today we're absolutely opening up the case file on a show that, it really captured a global audience. It mixed this razor-sharp wit with some really deep emotional trauma.
We're talking, of course, about The Mentalist. 7 seasons, 151 episodes, just a phenomenon.
A total phenomenon. And our mission today really is to look at the architecture of the whole series. We want to dissect that initial, just runaway success and figure out why it has such a lasting appeal.
And we have to talk about what was planned versus what felt a little rushed.
Oh, definitely. We'll be digging into the lingering plot holes, the mistakes that still drive fans crazy, and then crucially, why that final sense of closure for Patrick Jane and the team, why it felt so right and so beloved.
Well, the success story itself is, it's pretty staggering. It wasn't a slow burn. The show, created by Bruno Heller, just exploded right out of the gate.
It really did. Within months of launching, it had already won the 35th People's Choice Award for Favorite New TV Drama. That was back in 2009.
And the critics liked it, right? I remember the reviews were pretty decent.
They were good, yeah. Metascore gave it a 65 out of 100, generally favorable. They said, the procedural parts were solid, but the real story, like you said, is the audience reaction.
That's where it just goes through the roof.
Completely. User ratings shot up to universal acclaim, hitting an 8.3 out of 10. And that gap, that space between the critical 65 and the fan 8.3, that tells you everything.
So what is that? What does that gap mean?
I think it means critics saw a competent show, but the audience felt a connection. They fell in love with the characters, with the chemistry. The consensus was that the role of Patrick Jane was just tailor-made for Simon Baker.
Oh, absolutely. He had that perfect blend of, charm and irreverence, but with this deep, deep pain just underneath. It made him magnetic.
Totally. So let's unpack this setup. You've got Jane, this troubled genius consultant, but he's working in a very specific, very official environment. He's with the CBI.
The California Bureau of Investigation. And our sources really stress this point. This isn't some made-up TV agency. It's a real, historically respected organization.
That's right. The CBI is California's statewide criminal investigative bureau, and it operates under the Department of Justice. The creators needed that sense of authority, that elite structure, to justify having a civilian like Jane so close to these massive cases.
And the agency's history it's actually pretty old, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Its roots go way back. You can trace the lineage back to the California Rangers in, 1853. But for the show's context, the really important date is 1918.
Okay, so what happened then?
That's when the California Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, the CBCII, got its first real criminal investigative powers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, essentially the direct ancestor of the CBI we see in the show.
So by the time the show premieres in 2008, the CBI is this well-known, prestigious agency.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that prestige is so vital because it just highlights how weird Jane's position is. He's not a cop. He doesn't have a badge. He's this former carnival psychic who just sort of exists outside the normal rules.
Right. And working alongside the very by-the-book Teresa Lisbon and her team just makes his methods pop even more.
Exactly. The show's popularity probably even boosted the real agency's profile, even though, the real CBI went through some major restructuring after 2012. But in the show's world, Jane was playing with the best.
And his success, his whole reason for being there, hinged on the show's absolute core premise. Patrick Jane is not psychic.
Not at all. He's a master of observation, a trained con man, a mentalist. And this is where we can really dive into the fascinating mechanics of how he actually works.
This is the part I love. The fact that it's not magic is what makes it so brilliant. It's all based on craft.
It is. It's the architectural brilliance that hooked people. His skills are, loosely based on techniques used by real showmen and magicians, people like Darren Brown, who are very open about the fact that they're using psychology, not supernatural powers.
And that's the real takeaway for anyone watching. You can actually understand the mechanisms behind the illusion. So let's break down those tools that Jane uses, because he makes it look like magic, but it's all repeatable technique.
Okay, so we can probably break it down into 4 key techniques he uses constantly, sometimes all at once. The first, and maybe the most fundamental, is cold reading.
Cold reading. I've heard the term, but how does he use it so effectively when the stakes are, life and death?
Well, cold reading is all about getting information by watching someone's reaction, not by actually knowing anything beforehand.
Yeah.
So Jane will toss out a general statement.
Something that could apply to almost anyone.
Exactly. But He's not listening to the words. He's watching their face, their micro expressions, the tiniest widening of the eyes, a clench in the jaw, an involuntary nod. And based on that split-second reaction, he instantly adjusts his next statement.
So it's a feedback loop in real time. He's not reading their mind, he's reading their body, and then he just edits his script on the fly until they basically tell him what he wants to know.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's all social calibration. He might say something like, "I sense you've been dealing with a recent disappointment," maybe something at work. If their eyes flick to the left, towards the door, he knows the issue is current and they want to escape. If their shoulders tense up, he knows it's probably about a boss. He just follows the thread.
Which leads us to the second tool, which feels even more manipulative. This one gives the illusion of accuracy while saying, like, almost nothing at all. The rainbow ruse.
The rainbow ruse is pure linguistic sleight of hand. It's a statement that assigns someone a personality trait and its direct opposite at the same time. It's designed to be vague and contradictory to cover all the bases.
And why is that so effective?
Because our brains are wired to find meaning. The person hearing it immediately latches onto the part that feels true for them in that moment and just discards the contradiction. So it feels deeply, deeply personal.
Right, because everyone feels contradictory things.
Absolutely. Think about the classic example our sources gave. You are a very kind and considerate person, but when somebody breaks your trust, you feel a deep-seated anger. Who doesn't feel that way?
I mean, that's everybody.
It's everybody. Or another one. You seem very confident on the outside, but deep down, there's a part of you that's actually quite vulnerable to criticism. He uses this to build instant rapport, to make someone feel completely seen. And once they feel understood, they're much more likely to give up real information.
It's fascinating because it moves from just observation to pure rhetorical manipulation. So what does he do when he needs to just cast a wide net, like when he's scanning a crowd or a cold case file?
That's when he uses shotgunning. It's exactly what it sounds like. He just throws out a large number of vague statements, and many of them are statistically very likely to be true for that group of people.
So it's a numbers game.
It's a total numbers game. He's not looking for one perfect hit. He's looking for one or two that will stick, and that's enough to build his credibility.
Give me a good example of that.
Okay, so our sources have some great ones. If Jane is talking to someone who's, say, middle-aged, he might say something with a super high probability like, "I see a box of old unsorted photographs somewhere in your house."
I definitely have one of those.
Almost everyone does. Or something a bit more dramatic. "I'm sensing a heart problem with a father figure in your family." Heart disease is the leading cause of death, and father figure is so broad it could be anyone. When one of those high probability guesses lands, the person is stunned. They focus on the one hit and completely forget the 10 misses he had right before it.
So his genius is really built on this foundation of, I guess, manipulative social engineering. But the show is also clear that he uses legitimate cognitive tools, too. He's not just a con artist.
Not at all. He's a cognitive athlete. Beyond the verbal tricks, he's a master of nonverbal communication, analyzing microexpressions, how people walk, the tone of their voice. And the most famous real tool he uses is the memory palace.
The method of loci, that's a real ancient technique, right?
It is a completely legitimate way to organize and recall huge amounts of information. He mentally places clues, names, details inside a familiar space in his mind, his palace. It lets him access and connect information way faster than just trying to remember it.
And that's important because, unlike the rainbow ruse, that's a pure high-level cognitive skill. It grounds his genius in something real.
It does. But that brings us to the tension the show always had to walk. If his skills are just craft, how come he's so good at it? The show pushes his abilities into the realm of, narrative hyperbole. He's basically a superhero psychology.
And the audience accepts it because of the emotional price he paid for those skills.
Exactly. The whole reason he honed these skills to this level is because the Red John tragedy. The illusion works because he's paying the highest possible price for his past arrogance.
Which is the perfect pivot. That price dictates the entire 7-season hunt for the serial killer.
And that takes us right into the most debated, most analyzed, and ultimately the most structurally flawed part of the entire series. The Red John dilemma.
So let's just lay out the scope of this hunt. Jane's wife and daughter are murdered because he went on TV, used his psychic act, and mocked Red John. So this quest for revenge, or justice, completely redefines who he is.
It really does. I love the detail in our sources that Kimball Cho, who is not an emotional guy,
Not at all.
Jonas explicitly says that the trauma actually made him a better person. It turned him from this narcissistic, selfish charlatan into a man with a singular, focused, and, I guess, moral purpose.
Even if that purpose was vengeance. And for the creators, they had to keep this villain mysterious and threatening for almost 6 full seasons. That's a huge challenge.
A massive challenge. And you can see them doing narrative misdirection really early on, after the season 3 finale, for instance.
Oh, yeah. When Jane shoots the man he's convinced is Red John in the mall.
Right. And the shock was huge. But the creator, Bruno Heller, had to come out afterwards and tell everyone, you were supposed to be convinced.
Yeah.
He had to reassure people that the show wasn't over, that Red John was a master manipulator who might just want Jane to think he was dead.
But as the seasons went on, Red John started to feel different, bigger. He wasn't just a serial killer anymore.
No, he became something else. The sources point out that fans started describing him as having near supernatural levels of power and influence. He had eyes and ears everywhere. He was manipulating the CBI, the FBI.
Which led to that huge fan theory that Red John wasn't a person at all.
Exactly. That he was a symbol or an organization, which, turned out to be partially true with the Blake Association.
Let's just define that for anyone who might not remember.
The Blake Association was this secret, corrupt society of cops and officials, all loyal to Red John. They had a shared code, Tiger, and it meant Red John wasn't just one guy. He was the head of this massive conspiracy.
The conspiracy that made him seem almost omnipotent, and that mind game peaked in season 5.
That was the moment that really stretched belief. Jane is totally shaken because Red John figures out the 7 names on Jane's final suspect list 2 months before Jane himself even finalizes it.
How is that even possible?
Well, that's the point. It suggested Red John knew Jane's thought process so intimately that it bordered on, the supernatural. It pushed the villain into this almost godlike status.
So the audience is completely primed for this epic reveal. The person behind it all has to be a genius, Moriarty-level figure.
He had to be. But then, the pivot came. The story goes that audience figures were dipping, and the network basically pushed them to wrap up the Red John plot.
And that leads us to season 6, episode 8, The Rush to Reveal. The answer to this epic mystery is Sheriff Thomas McAllister.
Yeah, and the backlash was just enormous, both from critics and from fans.
So why did that choice specifically fall so completely flat?
It was a total structural collapse.
Yeah.
The Red John they had built up for 6 years, this mastermind controlling a secret society, outthinking Patrick Jane, it just didn't match the reveal of, as one fan put it, some random sheriff who was in one episode of season 1.
He just didn't have the stature.
None. He lacked the charisma, the screen time, the influence. The sources bring up a really key point.
What?
His identity was apparently literally undecided by the show creator since the beginning of S2.
Wow. So there was no plan.
It seems like there wasn't a single consistent plan. And when the destination is arbitrary, the whole journey feels a bit pointless in retrospect. Fans felt betrayed because you couldn't go back and see the clues pointing to McAllister. It just wasn't there.
And people had their own theories, right? Better suspects.
Oh, way better suspects. People wanted it to be Gail Bertram, the CBI director, or Brett Stiles, the cult leader, or even just the idea that the Blake Association was Red John, anything but a small-town sheriff who was suddenly this criminal puppeteer.
So the show basically promised a Moriarty and delivered, I don't know, a low-level henchman who just happened to be in charge.
That's a perfect summary of the structural failure, and that rush to wrap things up, that inconsistent plotting, it left behind some really specific, really glaring plot holes that fans still talk about.
Okay, let's get into one. That specific mistake from the season 3 finale, strawberries and cream. This really highlights how Jane's own focus on revenge made him miss things.
This is a great one because it shows how fragile the logic became. So in that finale, Jane sets a trap in the mall to lure Red John. A bunch of people are involved in setting it up. Jane kills the imposter eats there. The plot hole is about Agent Craig O'Loughlin.
Right, who was part of Lisbon's team but was also Red John's mole.
Exactly. So O'Loughlin was there helping set the trap, but he never knew the specific details of the lure Jane was using, which means someone had to be directing him.
And the only person there who could have been directing him
was Gail Bertram, the director of the CBI, who was later revealed to be part of the Blake Association.
So logically, Bertram must have been in direct contact with O'Loughlin, proving his connection to Red John right then and there.
Precisely. And if Jane, the master observer, had just thought back on the events of that day while he was in jail, he should have connected those dots. He should have realized Bertram was dirty seasons earlier.
But he misses it.
He misses it, which suggests the writers needed him to miss it to keep the mystery going. even if it meant undermining Jane's own genius. His emotional tunnel vision was used as a cover for a writing oversight.
That's fascinating. So the plot was no longer driven by Jane's intelligence, but by the writer's need to just keep the plate spinning.
I think that's fair to say. But here's the crazy thing. Despite this massive dissatisfaction with the central mystery, with the answer, the show is still intensely beloved.
Which proves the true heart of the show was somewhere else entirely.
Completely. The emotional success of the show just redeems the logical failures of the plot. The real story was always Patrick Jane's journey. It was his slow, painful crawl from darkness and self-loathing back toward the light. The audience cared about the man, not the monster he was chasing.
That shift in focus from all-consuming revenge to actual healing, that was the real payoff.
It was. The creator, Bruno Heller, even talked about the killing of Red John in season 6. He called it a really beautiful, intimate killing because it needed to be that visceral, personal moment of closure for Jane. It wasn't about the law. It was about Jane finally being able to put down this horrible burden.
And the key to him being able to do that, the thing that carried the whole back half of the series, was the relationship between Jane and Teresa Lisbon, Gisbin, as the fans call it.
That relationship was the show's anchor. It wasn't built on, sudden passion. It was built on years of deep trust and just unconditional caring. Lisbon was the only one who could handle him.
The sources say she was the only person capable of controlling him.
And not through authority, but through understanding. She understood his trauma, his darkness, and she didn't judge it. She never tried to fix him. She just sort of contained the chaos and loved the broken man underneath it all.
She was the one constant, solid thing in his life. And it's so rare for a show to let a deep professional partnership like that actually evolve into a romance, especially when apparently the creator was against it at first.
Yeah, Heller originally said that Jane and Lisbon getting together was not the plan, but the narrative gravity, and I'm sure the fan pressure, was just too strong. The show eventually caved in, and you know what? The fans were right.
Why do you say that?
Because the romance gave the show the thematic closure that Killing Red John never could. The final season, with the proposal, the wedding, the news that they're going to be parents, that was Jane's happy, bright spot. It showed he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was rebuilding. He was living again.
And that redemptive arc really resonated with people on a personal level.
It really did. Our sources mention how fans saw that hopeful ending as a very kind and thoughtful effort. That for some viewers who were dealing with their own personal losses, it was healing. It affirmed that second chances are possible, that you can find family again, even after the worst has happened.
So the show becomes more than just a procedural. It becomes a story about psychological recovery, about the power of found family.
Absolutely. And you can't talk about that without talking about Simon Baker's performance. The commitment he brought to that journey was just essential. And the show's success, it really changed his life and career too. Well, after 7 seasons and 151 episodes, he had the financial freedom to move back to Australia and start choosing roles where he felt less like a commodity and more like an artist.
That's a really interesting reflection on being the lead of a huge global hit. I can't imagine that pressure.
He talked about it. He said when he was younger, he felt that weight, that responsibility. But as he got older, he gained confidence and found total rediscovery of his love for acting. He could finally take on roles where he could pour his own life experience, his own pain into the characters.
So with the Red John story finally put to bed and Jane and Lisbon getting their happy ending, the show wrapped up after season 7. Was there ever any real talk of it continuing?
There was an openness to it. Both Heller and Robin Tunney, who played Lisbon, said it was a remarkably happy experience and that there was no reason why it couldn't continue. But creatively, the decision was made that the story was done.
Closure for the audience was the most important thing.
It was paramount. Heller was clear. Red John is gone. His story is over, and we're not bringing him back. So while, the business of television always leaves a door cracked open for a reunion movie or something.
Well, you never say never.
You never say never. But creatively, the story got its definitive ending. The emotional journey was complete. And I think that sense of completion is why it's still so popular on streaming. People know they're going to get a satisfying conclusion.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it. We started this conversation by breaking down these hyper-specific mentalist techniques. Then we went through the massive failure of the central mystery. And we've ended up talking about the redemptive power of a relationship.
It really forces you to ask, what was the show actually about? The mystery was just the engine. It was the device that put Jane and Lisbon in a room together for 7 years. But the real story, the journey of Jane's emotional evolution and the development of his found family, that was ultimately what mattered to the audience.
So, and this is maybe the final thought here, does the controversial, kind of disappointing nature of the Red John reveal actually underscore the show's main success, which was its ability to make us care so deeply about the humanity of this one charming, broken man?
I think it absolutely does. The flaw in the mystery only highlighted the strength of the characters. The show built a world, a dynamic, the banter, the trust, the shared grief, that was so compelling that the audience was willing to forgive a huge structural problem with the villain.
The journey was more important than the destination.
Exactly. The mystery was the engine, but the humanity was the destination. And at the end of the day, that's a much more hopeful and lasting message to leave with people.
A great reminder that sometimes it's the relationships and the healing along the way that matter far more than the final answer you're looking for. A really profound thought to wrap up this deep dive on The Mentalist.
My pleasure. It just goes to show that a truly great character arc can be strong enough to overcome almost any plot hole.
Well said. We'll catch you next time.